Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. How are you this afternoon or evening time? I hope you are having a great day. Welcome to my house. Welcome to my home, to my bathroom, actually. Today, we're going to talk about history. And in this occasion, I am very, very happy to introduce to you all the story of the Japanese immigration. Hola, Diana. Hello. Hi. Thanks for coming. Thank you so much for visiting my home today. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. It is going to be for moments a little bit more technical than the others because I want to tell you the history of this very important group, although it's not the biggest one we have in Peru. It is a community that is much beloved by Peruvians. They are known nowadays as the king of the gastronomy in Peru. The Japanese descendants, with their fusion cuisine that we call Nikkei, are conquering the palates of the world and have already conquered us Peruvians and our hearts. So before we start, I would like to know if you are new to my tours here in Lima, if this is the first time you are having a tour of mine in Hego. So just to introduce myself, first, my name is Vanessa Vasquez. I am an official tour guide from Lima, Peru. My specialty is history. I love archaeology. I love colonial period. And also I am very into the Republican period, which is the time when we built the idea of a nation. And these three important periods of the history, which are very, very long, especially the pre-Hispanic, need special emphasis. So that's why I am doing these tours from my home. So in that way, I can answer some questions and also, let's say, give you better information with pictures. So Diana, your tours are, oh, gracias, Diana. Thank you. I really hope this when you like it. And by the way, for those that want to know from where I take the information for the explanation of today's tour, today's lecture that is going to be just 30 minutes long, is actually coming from this book. I don't know if you can see it well. I hope you can also hear me well. If you can, please give me a thumbs up. That would be lovely because we've been having some issues with the platform, let's say, sort of like recently. So, gracias, Arlene. Gracias, Betty, Teresa. Thank you. So, this book is in Spanish. Yes, it's one of the many books. I have a really big collection of books about history. Most of them are in Spanish, but also I'm sure you can find information in English, especially in YouTube. So is this appropriate for a 9-year-old? Jasper, we are going to be talking about some moments in the history which maybe might not be, it's not like blood in the images, but there will be tough moments in the history. So I'm going to also let you know a little bit in advance when this will be happening, but well, be careful with that. See? Okay, my dear. So, well, this book is The Future Was Peru. The Future Was Peru. It was written by Alejandro Sacuda. He's a Peruvian Japanese, and it was in commemoration of the 100-year anniversary of the immigration of the Japanese to Peru. So most of you might know that Peruvians are sort of like a blend of different cultures. Japanese is one of those cultures. And if this event becomes very, very interactive, I'm going to plan possibly a part 2 if it's necessary, with the questions you put here, and also with maybe things I was not able to add because I am inspiring this event in this book. Okay, so, well, are you ready to start, my friends? Are you ready? So I hope you enjoy very much this event. And now we are going to start with this slideshow. As usual, I use a slideshow for these events from home so you can have a chance to see images. So first of all, we're going to talk about the period when Peru became a Spanish colony. And that is officially the time when we had the first immigrations from Japan. Nowadays, by the way, the Japanese community is quite large, but it's not the biggest from Asia. Actually, the biggest community we have in Peru from Asia is the Chinese. The Chinese community is a very big. Approximately, we have more or less a 10% of the population of Peru that are descendants of Chinese immigrants that came, most of them in the 19th century. The Japanese is a little bit different. The community in this moment might be around 100,000 descendants. So it's not a huge community. And most of them are descendants of migrants or immigrants who came at the end of the 19th century. But the story of the immigration from Japan started in the colonial period. In a period, it is called the era or the epoch Edo, no, the Edo period, the Edo epoch. And that is a period when Japan was a very closed country. Escaping or going out from Japan was not contemplated. People could be even killed if they did that. So it was a feudal country. There were lords that were called feudal lords, which were the landowners. And most of the Japanese people were into the agriculture. They work for the feudal, let's say, lord. So the first immigrations started back in that period, but very, very, very few, very isolated. And for example, the first Japanese men that we have information about actually came even before the era Edo in the year 1596. And this man is known in our history as Francisco Japón, Francis Japan. It still is very hard for us Peruvians to pronounce Japanese names correctly or Chinese names correctly. So that's why during that period and the next period, the Republican time, we also usually change the names of the Japanese immigrants. So back then, there were about 20 Japanese men in this city in Lima. This information was taken from a census from the year 1614. Actually, the first work in which they were, put to, let's say, labor was in construction. For example, in construction of churches and in construction of bridges. So I can imagine that the appearance of the Japanese men might have been like the fashion they used, the looks they had might have been very, very peculiar, and Peruvian people might possibly find this fashion too strange for their taste. Here also you can see in this section, I hope I can use, I think, a pen better for not putting my finger. So in this section you can see some original contracts in which also a Japanese slave, which is actually Francisco Japón, was given to a landowner here in the colonial period of Peru, right? So this is something very, very curious because the territory where these Japanese men, let's say, was put to work here in Peru nowadays belongs since the year 1776 to Argentina. Is this when the shogun related rule Japan? Yes, Larry, that's right. So far, I know I am not an expert in Japanese history, but I remember from movies, for example, from some literature, I have read that, yes, that's the period of the shogun. Mm-hmm. So with the Republican period, we became a independent country from Spain in the year 1820. By the way, are you seeing me well? I'm seeing like some sign of reconnecting. I hope everything is all right. I am in my house, so I should not be a problem, the internet. So the Republican period was a period of changes for Peru. It was a period of openness to the world. And also, few decades after the independence of Peru, Japan also opened the doors of their land and and happened a big reform in Japan. Also, we were in process of reforming here, Peru, and also Japan started with their big reforms. From a feudal country, it turned up to be a open country to commerce, to trade, and that was all because of the Emperor Meiji. That's what we call, or it's called, the Meiji era. So it was a time also of big changes. Well, this young emperor, he decided to like change everything from feudal to let's say a more modern, and he dreamed with giving education to the Japanese, and also he wanted to create connections with different countries. He even spent part of his life, or a period of his life, in Russia. He had very good connections with the Tsar of Russia. So here is also the time when a scandal happened in Peru, and a scandal also that had sort of like big implications in the next relations we would have with the Japanese people, and a treaty that later came up. So, for example, something very important is that in the period in question, in the mid 19th century, Peru was making money out of the profits of the guano and also out of the exportation of different products. But we were needing workers. We gave the freedom to the African slaves in the year 1854, and that had a very big repercussion in the way how the landowners, were producing their products, because you don't have black slaves, you don't have African slaves. So now, who are you going to be putting to work in the land? So that's why Chinese came on the field, right? Chinese come in the picture. Chinese were, or the coolies, that's the way how we called them back then, were put to work in the places where the African slaves were originally, right? But they were not very well treated. In our minds, we continue treating these people as slaves. They were slaves with contracts, right? So here you can see a Chinese man, by the way, with shackles. You can see him, like carrying heavy pots. This is the work they used to do. Most of the cases, if it was not picking up guano, it was sugar cane. They were put to work in the sugarcane plantation to refine sugarcane. So here's when the story of the ship Maria Luz comes to the picture. The ship Maria Luz was transporting from Macau to Peru. It was the year 1872. A big group of Chinese men that were coming to work as slaves, basically. So because some technical problems, the ship had to go. What is guano? Oh, Carol, thanks for asking. Guano is the poop of the seabirds. It is used as a fertilizer still nowadays. It's an efficient, excellent fertilizer. So we were making money in Peru from the poop of the birds back then. And we were exporting this product to the world, basically to North America, to the United States in particular, and to Europe, different countries in Europe. So that was a terrible work, by the way, terrible work. So the ship Maria Luz got had a technical problem. So they needed to do a detour, and they went to the port of Yokohama. I think the next one. Yes. So Yokohama in Japan. And well, as you can imagine, this ship was loaded with lots of Chinese men who were terribly treated. The information is that there were 225 coolies there, and they were all assassinated. They were all in pack there. They were not treated well. They were beaten in public. They were not well given, like fed. So when they had to go to the port of Yokohama. We don't know how, but one of the coolies in the ship escaped from the ship, and he was able to go to the Japanese authorities, and declare how bad he was treated and all of his, friends inside the ship. So, well, of course, that it was a big scandal. We are still in the Meiji era, of course, so it's a time of reform. And, well, this became world news. Peru back then also was seen as a strong military country because we won a war against the Spanish. The Spanish in the year 1866 tried to occupy Peru again, and we won that battle, the Battle of May the 2nd of 1866. So that's the point when, Peru started to be seen as a strong military country. And Japan did not want it to fight with Peru, but also, well, this accusation was very, very bad. So it was necessary at some point to have a referee between, Peru and Japan, because the ship Maria Luz was confiscated with all the Chinese men inside for several days to do the investigations, to do the interrogation. And the captain of the ship, asked to the Japanese authorities to liberate the ship because it was all in their rights to do what they were doing, and that all the expenses in the ship were too much for them to support. So they needed to go out. At the end, well, the ship stayed in Japan for 3 years in total. And, finally, it had to be sold out because it never returned to Peru. It was a very big scandal. So it was necessary, the mediation of the Tsar of Russia to finally, put a solution, because there were some, commentaries from the Japanese that they were saying that it was not possible that the Peruvians should treat like this these Chinese workers, and the Peruvians said they had the right to do it. They had contracts. They had to go to Peru to give the workers to the plantation fields that were waiting for them. So at the end, the Tsar of Russia decided to support the Japanese point of view, and the ship had to be sold out. And it was a big scandal, big scandal. It was the time of President Manuel Pardo here in Peru. He was also sort of like a reformist in a way. So it was a very complicated time for us. So during that period of complications, a very important Peruvian man, Aurelio Garcia y Garcia, had to go to Japan to talk about this. And there was even the possibility of a war. Can you imagine Peru going in a war against, Japan, right? Now it would be impossible, right? But back then, Peru had the confidence to do that. So, well, at the end, Japan sort of like won this question, and it was done. The first treaty, a diplomatic treaty of diplomatic relations between Japan and a Latin American country. It was the very first one that Japan signed up with a Latino country. It was with Peru. And this treaty also was related with peace between the nations, also possibly like animating the possibility of Japanese people going to work to Peru and vice versa. So eventually it became something positive. But honestly, since it was signed up in the year 1875, nothing happened really for some years. This treaty was more forced, to be honest, by the situation that happened, see this possible war that could happen. And Japan did not want to go to war with Peru because we were seen very, very strong. So let's see. Carol, are you asking me something? Why did he go to? Oh, just let me know if I'm reading this correctly, or if you want to reformulate your question, Carol, please. Thank you. So the first consul in Japan that represented Peru was Mr. Oscar Hering. He was German, actually, but he lived in Peru. He was very beloved here in Peru by the president of that time. So this is why, as seen as a very, very eloquent man and well educated, he was sent to Japan to also as a representative of Peru. And later on, some years after, he returned to Peru with the first Japanese immigrants from the Republican period. He wanted to because he saw the how strong laborers Japanese people were. He wanted to introduce the Japanese immigration to Peru. Right. He also came with four workers actually that first time, and also one of his workers, for example, create the first Japanese garden in Peru, which was here in his house in Lima in the Hacienda Jere. But we don't have pictures of that, unfortunately. That must have been really beautiful. And also another gentleman, Mankichi Nakamura, which eventually took the last name Valdez. He also stayed here in Peru and moved to the Central Andes. So from that first group, one of them stayed here permanently. So during that period, during that time of the, let's say, the Republican period, when the Peruvians started to see, let's say, this immigration, very small immigration from Japanese to Peru, something happened in Japan also. Lots of people started to emigrate to North America, right? About, so far I know from the investigations I've done, 400,000 Japanese emigrated to USA. And initially it was a very, very welcome, the coming of immigrants from Japan. But I assume, and also historians assume, that because of the large numbers of immigrants, the United States started to decline from this immigration. It was like too much, too rapid. By the way, sorry for the typos. I made this, very fast. So the USA started to decline and started to push back the immigration. That's why the immigration route started to turn into another direction, into South America, into Peru and Brazil also. Maybe you remember my colleague Sayuri from Brazil, from Salvador de Bahia. She made a series about the Japanese immigration to Brazil, which were excellent. So Brazil and Peru are nowadays the nations in South America that have the largest Japanese communities. As you know already, in my country, we have about 100,000 Japanese descendants, which are also very well integrated in our country. So this is the way how the contracts back then used to look, the contracts to come to Peru. So I can imagine how it was, the many questions the Japanese had in their minds about coming to Peru, to this distant land, how they would dress up, what would they eat, and the same things we're wondering here in Peru. We know nothing about the Japanese. So you have a contract that was signed up by a married couple, de esposos, that's a married couple, that came to Peru in 1913. This was not the first arrival or first group of immigrants, but just to give you an idea, there are not so many contracts existing. This one, for example, is really interesting to see. The Japanese people, in the difference between the Chinese and the Japanese are some. First of all, that the Japanese people who came to Peru, most of them were not illiterate. They were educated. They knew their rights, right? They knew they had contracts. And this will also be a big detonant, a big breaking point between the Japanese workers and the landowners that contracted them here in Peru, because the landowners wanted to exploit them at some point. They believed they were like the Chinese coolies, and that was not the case. Also, another big difference is that, as you can see here, we have a couple of husband and wife that are coming together. This is a matrimony. But in the case of the Chinese immigrants, most of them were single men. right? Were men only, right? The ages of the Japanese men who came to Peru in that initial group. We're talking about the last year of the 19th century and then the beginnings of the 20th century, were between 20 years old and 40 years old. So that was also a big difference with the Chinese immigrants. The Chinese immigrants that came decades before the Japanese, they were in some cases from 14 years old, so they were very, very young, until 40 years old. So we're talking about a more mature group of men. But it doesn't mean they were not at some point lied. When they came to Peru, many of them believed Peru was a land, first of all, where gold was everywhere. Can you imagine that? That they believed that gold was in the rivers, and you could go in the river and take out gold. That all the climate in Peru was very mild and very good, therefore for Japanese people to go. There were no endemic diseases. So these were lies. Yes, Arlene, in the case of the Chinese immigration that happened in the middle of the 19th century, indeed, there were children coming, just children, child labor, as Shannon said. But in the case of the Japanese, because of the example of the Chinese immigration, and also maybe you remember the treaty that we signed up with Japan, and this situation that we had with the this confiscated ship with coolies in Yokohama. So Japan had at least we had at least a document, no, in which we could not do that again, right? But it doesn't mean everything was a bed of roses, of course, right? So you can see here a ship that is very special for our story, because this ship, this one here, is the Sakura Maru. The Sakura Maru was the first ship that transported workers to Peru from Japan. Laurie, thank you so much for your tip support, my friends. Your tips are the fuel that helped me to continue doing these events, and also they help directly to Hego, because we share these tips with Hego. This is the only actually income we get from these tours. So thank you so much. So I was saying that from Japan arrived the Sakura Maru. Actually, here you have some information in English that I have translated for you. So they were on board 797 immigrants in total. That's the consensus, because some documents says 790. Some others said a little bit more. So most of them agree with 1797 immigrants in total. And also the ship departed from Yokohama in February 27, 1899. It arrived after a little bit more than a month to Lima, right? So in this ship, there were only just men in the first immigration group, and they were sent to different haciendas in the coast of Peru. So the idea was initially sending them to hacienda houses. Right. So you can imagine that, there's a story, like at some point it has to turn into something bad. Right. And it did. So first of all, here we have a picture of Japanese workers that are in a sugarcane plantation in the Hacienda Santa Barbara. Gracias, Larry. And they are, some of them dressed up in a traditional way, but most of them are dressed up in a more like westernized clothes, right? So this is, of course, not the first group, because we can see also some women here in the group, right? We don't have pictures of the first group of immigrants, but we have some documents, some some pictures also from the distance of the same ship, right? Again, 1899. This is the Hacienda Santa Barbara, the Casa Blanca. All these are different haciendas located along the coast of Peru. And here we have also the news in the newspaper. How, first of all, the immigration a year before, in the year 1898, was became a public of public knowledge in a newspaper. And also over here we have the information of the arrival of the Sakura Maru, with the immigrants, right? So you can imagine people were expecting to see the Japanese arriving to Lima, but when they arrived to the port of Callao, which is the port of Lima, they did not left the ship. They remain inside after they were checked. They were isolated for a couple of days, and then after they were able to continue to other ports. Here you have a passport also with the stamp to go to Peru. This is a Japanese passport, right? So we will continue over here. And also this is something very curious because the nominas or the documents where the immigrants are, let's say, put in lists don't have names. Do you know why they don't have names? Can you imagine why? We're talking about people. They don't have names. They have number 9. That's 921. We have over here 955. So the reason, my friends, is because Japanese names were very difficult to be pronounced. So that's why in the hacienda houses, they were just given numbers. They were assigned numbers. Also here we have the pictures of the first Japanese immigrant in Peru, Yoso Tsukano, who married a Peruvian woman, Maria Silvestre, which is this lady over here, married to him in the year 1906, right? So this is, let's say, one of the first blended Peruvians, mixed blood Japanese Peruvians. So we have also some pictures about the work that they were they done here in the haciendas. We have ships, for example. Over here we have the work in the sugarcane plantations. Most of these are haciendas azucareras. Hacienda is a plantation, right? And focusing sugar. But also they work in different other fields. Many of them started like from scratch their lives here, and they wanted to work for a couple of years. The contracts said 4 years, 4 years leasing with the landowner. So they were not treated as slaves, right? Diana, well, honestly, with the example of the Chinese semi-slavery treatment, the Japanese knew the rights, and they had to fight, of course, for like not working over hours, for example. And here I'm going to explain things to Diana for your question. What I want to explain about what happened here in Peru with them, and the situation that they had to face when they arrived to the hacienda houses. So, for example, in one of these cases, these Japanese men were put to work. Like, first of all, they were offered to be given a payment that will not be the sort of like discounted in the moment from there was an amount of money that was supposed to be taken at some point to return to Japan, right? After 4 years of work. But the idea was that they would be able to receive 2 soles for the day of work. They were working 10 hours, in some cases up to 12 hours. They were not working 8 hours. So when they came to the haciendas, for example, the Hacienda San Silvestre, they were first treated well, and then after they were started to be put to work for more hours, or to do works that they were not supposed to do. For example, cleaning up the acequias. The acequias are these sections, channels where the water runs, right? And that sometimes is because it's water from the rivers. It can be, like, packed with dirt and let's say organic materials. So they were not supposed to work there. Why that was a bad work? The reason is because usually there were lots of mosquitoes in those sections, and you could get diseases, especially immigrants. They could get diseases from being bitten by the mosquitoes, because it was like a swampy location. So they didn't want to work in those places, and they were not supposed to work in those places. They were supposed to work in the sugar cane plantations. So less than a month after the arrival of the Sakura Maru, there was already a protest of Japanese. It never happened with the Chinese. It took a long, long time for some Chinese, to stand up. In the case of the Japanese, they right away they started to protest, and they did not want it to work like in that way. They were also discounted money. They or were not paid their money when they should. So this is why the situation sort of like braked. And the Peruvian people started to consider them to be lazy, because they were not working in what the work they were supposed to do. But that was not the case. They were not contracted to do that. Also, the newspapers move the news in the way they like, they prefer, so they manipulate, because they were also supporting the landowners, which were the rich people, right? So this is very important for you to know, that the Japanese also always worked for together for defending the rights, right? So very, very interesting beginning of this story, right? So you can see also that later on, after those 4 years of working in the hacienda houses, of course, not every hacienda house was like that. I'm just taking one example of some of the haciendas that were mean to the immigrants. But in the case of the others that treated well their workers, well, they also cooperated, help in them to integrate into the society. Yes, my dear Shannon, the Chinese, I already done a tour about the Chinese immigration. So I hope you were there. If not, I hope to be able to repeat it because it's a really interesting story. I've done one dedicated to the Chinese immigration to Peru, and one to the African immigration to Peru, as well of the Jewish immigration to Peru. So I hope you were there. If not, hope to repeat it soon. Right. So here you have a store, for example, a store from the year 1912 of a Japanese first generation Japanese here in Lima, and also how they are uniting, they are forming groups. They started to marry with Peruvians. This is the first Japanese house ever made in Lima, this complete Japanese style in La Victoria in Lima in the year 1923. Right? And we're going to finish with this because I have lots of more slideshows to share with you. And also, I think I'm going to be doing a part two because I have to talk about Fujimori, the president. We had a president of Peru that was a Japanese Peruvian. So we have to talk about him later, about the modern Japanese presence in Peru. But this is very special because even though there was lots of harsh beginning between the Japanese and their contractors here in Peru, Japanese people were so nice to integrate and eventually even to thank Peru for their for the way how they were able to form families here or work, right? Oh, gracias, Diana. Gracias, Lori. Yes, Carol, of course, Arlene, I will. This monument here was a present from the Japanese community. It was paid by the Japanese community in Peru for the celebrations of the anniversary of the independence of Peru, 100 years independence of Peru that we celebrated in 1921. So our community gave us this beautiful monument that represents Manco Capac, the first Inca king, and he's pointing in direction to the sunrise. And also the Japanese have a connection with the sunrise. They are the nation of the sunrise, right? So this is possibly why they chosen this element to create a connection between us and them. Oh, gracias, Diana, Iris, Adrian, for your tip support. Just to give you a little look, we are coming to the end of this tour for now, but look at all the things we have ahead. We have lots of, well, we have the story of Fujimori. Well, I don't want to burn this, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what is coming in the next part of this tour. So thank you so much. And I'm also going to, at the end of this event, let me give you my information if you would like to come to the next one, to the next event I have. Just give me a second. Okay, so are you Japanese Peruvian? Carol, let me tell you something. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know because there was a large immigration of Japanese and Chinese to the Central Andes, and my family all my family are also like this, like they have almond-shaped eyes. We believe we might have Chinese, but I want to do my DNA test. So that would be really wonderful to know, to discover what I really have. That would be super. So I'm going to share with you, my dear friends. So I am a box of surprises. So look at this. This is my information for this weekend. I have a tour to visit an archaeological site. We're going to the archaeological site. It's not going to be from my home. So let's go together to visit an archaeological place in Lima. Let's go up to a pyramid. So that's going to be super fun. Also, here my Facebook group, my Facebook and Instagram. I have a YouTube channel also, and well, all my contacts over here. So if you wish to follow my upcoming tours, you are all kindly invited. Thank you so much for your tip support, my friends, Bridget, Lori. As you know, this is the only way how we can continue doing these tours. Let's say for us, like continue working, because many of us are not working anymore as much. Finally, in Peru, we're having some few tourists that are coming. So little by little, things are going back to normal, but you're helping us a lot, and also helping the platform Heygo to continue like keeping this platform open to everybody, because that's the way how well, culture should be for free, right? And if you can support us, well, that's super great. Of course, if you would like to know how to do it, I'm just activating a button where you can help me with a tip. Gracias, Lisa. See you very soon. I hope this time was good for most of you, midday. And I'll try also to make my upcoming tours of this topic at this time. Take care. Lots of love. I hope to see you on the weekend on Saturday. And follow me. There's a button up there somewhere here. And well, take care. Have a lovely rest of the week. See you soon, my friends. Muchas gracias. Gracias, Lisa. Thank you. Bye-bye. Gracias. Oh, Lori. Really? Oh, that's really. I want to do my DNA test. I'm saving money for that, doing that, because they don't do it here in Peru. So I'm going to share with you all. No worries. Bye-bye, my friends. Ciao, ciao. Have a lovely rest of the week. Best to you all.